Okay.
Ready?
We are live.
Okay. So welcome. We are holding at chapter 8 of Chometz and Matzah, chapter 8 of the halachas, the laws of Pesach. And today we're going to be finishing the laws of Pesach. We're going to finish off with the Seder, the order of how to do the order, how to do the Seder. So halacha aleph, halacha number 1. The proper way to do this order of things is as follows: on the night of the 15th, the first night of Pesach. So the beginning of the Seder, what do? We give everybody a cup of wine and we make a bracha, and you make the bracha of Kiddush on it, Zman, which is the Shechiyanu, Vishaisa, and you drink. And then you make the bracha al Netilas Yadayim, and you wash your hands. And you bring a set table which has on it maror. It has maror on it. Yarak, it has vegetable on it. Yarak acher, a different vegetable. Matzah v'chareises and chareises v'gufay shel keves. And the Rambam is gonna go between the halachas, the way it applies at the time of the Beis Hamikdash and time of the temple, when we would bring the Paschal lamb, the Pesach sacrifice, and the holiday sacrifice, Karban Chagiga, and then mention also what the halacha would be according to the Rambam in our times when we don't bring the Pesach sacrifice. So here, v'gufay shel keves haPesach u'b'sar chagiga, and also the body of the Paschal lamb, and the meat of the sacrifice that we bring for the holiday, chagiga sacrifice, which is a sacrifice brought just for the holiday, not connected necessarily to Pesach. I mean, it's obviously connected to Pesach, but it's a sacrifice brought for each of the holidays. So shel yemar ba'asar, this that was brought on the 14th day in the Beis Hamikdash, b'zman hazeh, and in our times that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, mevinas al shulchan shnei minei basar, we bring two different types of meat. Echad zeicher lePesach, one is a remembrance to Pesach, ve'echad zeicher lechagiga, and one is to remember the sacrifice, the chagiga sacrifice. As we mentioned many times, we don't paskin halacha from the Rambam. We do it slightly different. We don't do it exactly according to the Rambam, but it gives you an outline of, and as I like to say, when you learn the Rambam, when you learn these kinds of halachas, you'll at least know what to ask. When you have a question, you'll know what to ask. But this is, we don't paskin exactly like this, but it's very similar. Halacha base number 2. Then afterwards, right? So we're continuing over here. After he washed his hands, so after the person washes their hands, so you make a bracha and we take the vegetable and we dunk it in the charaises, right? We do it in salt water. This is the Rambam Pasuk is the charaises. And this is the vegetable that we eat, and you should eat the size of an olive. Not just one person, because we talked about bringing the set table to the person sitting at the head of the table, but it's supposed to be for everybody around the table. Everybody should eat not less than a kezayis. And then you take away that table, that set table, not from everybody, but from the person, the head of the table, the one who's going to lead the Seder, and the one who's going to read the Haggadah. And then you pour your second cup before you start Magid, V'kana ben Shayel, and now the child asks the 4 questions. And what does he say? Why is this night different than all of the nights? All of the nights we dip, we don't dip even one time tonight, twice. All nights we eat whatever we want, chametz or matzah. Tonight it's only matzah. On all of the nights we eat meat, but the meat can be roasted, the meat could be cooked, the meat could be boiled, but tonight it's only roasted. All of the nights we eat all different types of vegetables. Tonight only maror. All of the nights we eat, whether sitting straight up or leaning. Tonight we eat leaning. So these are the 5 questions that the Rambam brings up. Bizman hazeh eino yomer, but in today's day, halacha gimel, number 3, we don't talk about v'aleilu zekulei tzali. We don't talk about the roasted part, she'ein lanu karban, because we don't bring this Pesach sacrifice. Matzah big news. And then you start reading the Haggadah, which you start on the negative, and you continue until the story of the Jewish people, starting with our forefathers. Halacha Dalid, number 4, and then afterwards, once you're done the process of Magid, which you're going to see soon after this chapter, my father is going to read for you. The Rambam goes through exactly how to do Magid, what's the process of doing Magid. But after you do Magid, so then we consider it to be part of Magid, but Magid is the story of the Jewish people going out of Egypt. So at some point, we finished talking about the story of the Jewish people going out of Egypt, and then and then we talk about the night, tonight, the night of Pesach. And you bring back the table and you say Pesach zeh shanu eichlim al shur al shem shepasach amakem al bate v'seinu b'mitzrayim shneimar v'raytu zeh Pesach Hashem. And then when you bring back the table, so you have on the table you have the Paschal lamb. So you talk about this is the Paschal lamb that our forefathers did in Egypt. And then magbi amar biyad v'emer mar zeh shanu eichlim al shem shemar v'mitzrayim eschaya v'seinu b'mitzrayim shneimar mar eschayim, that you pick up the maror and you say that this maror that we're eating is in memory of the bitter times that our forefathers had in Egypt. And then you pick up the matzah and you say that we eat this matzah because our forefathers didn't have time that their bread should rise on their way out of Egypt. And then but now that we don't bring the Paschal lamb, we say Pesach we say the Paschal lamb that our forefathers used to eat when there was a Beis Hamikdash, when there was a holy temple. But was in memory of the fact that Hashem jumped over, passed over the houses of our forefathers in Egypt. Halacha hey number 5. And he says, and then he continued the end of Magid. We say and then we based on everything that we said in Magid. This is the fastest Magid you've heard, right? Based on everything that we said in Magid, we come and we say, we say based on all this, therefore we have to praise Hashem, thanking Hashem for doing all these miracles and taking us out of slavery. And then we continue and we say different psalms that are part of the Hallel. Halukah Hashem, which is the first psalm of Hallel. And you end off Magid. You bless Hashem for redeeming us and bringing us to this night where we could eat matzah and maror. And in today's day, when we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, we say Kain Hashem Elokeinu v'Kleiv Yagin L'Meidim L'Gam L'Acheidim V'Vayim L'Kaseinu L'Shalom V'Smeichim V'Nirecha V'Sasim V'Veizachem V'Sham V'Nazvachem V'Navzachem She'Yageh Damu Al Kir Mizbach Chal L'Ratzin V'Nei L'Chal Shir Chadash Al Gilseinu V'Abdus Nafsheinu Baruch Hashem Gal Yisrael. And this is the end that we in our times we add in a blessing asking Hashem that He should bring us back to the Beis Hamikdash, bring us back to Yerushalayim with Mashiach, where we'll be able to again bring the Pesach sacrifice with all its details and with the praises that come with it. And then afterwards, and then you make a Borei Pri Hagafen and you drink the second cup of wine. Pesach Seder, right? We have 4 cups of wine. This is the second cup of wine. Halacha number 6. And then you go and you make a al til yadayim and you wash your hands a second time. We can't rely on the first one because he wasn't thinking. You have to, in order to rely on the first washing your hands, you have to think about it the whole time. You can't think about something else. But b'shas kiras Haggadah, when you're reading the Haggadah, your mind wasn't on that, so therefore you have to wash your hands again. And you take 2 full matzahs. and then you leave one, and then you hold the broken piece of matzah and the whole piece of matzah, and you make a meitzah min aretz. But usually on Shabbos and other Yom Tov, we know that we make a bracha on 2 loaves, so it should be 2 whole matzahs. Why do we say the one whole and one broken one? It has to be poor man's bread. A poor person eats a piece of bread. He doesn't have a whole loaf of bread. So therefore, over here, we also do it with a piece. And this is one way of doing it, one version of doing it, that you eat the matzah and butter together, and you dunk it in the chareises, and you make a bracha. The bracha is that to eat matzah and butter, and you eat it. But and this is if you do the way we do, la halacha, we do that, we eat matzah b'fnei atzmo, butter b'fnei atzmo. They eat matzah on its own and butter on its own. So then mevarech al zeh b'fnei atzmo, al zeh b'fnei atzmo, you make a bracha on each one individually, like we do. Halacha zayin number 7. V'achkach mevarech, and then you make a bracha baruch Hashem lekin melech ha'olam asher kisham mitzvah tzvanu alachilas hazavach. Then comes your opportunity to get a good piece of steak at the Pesach Seder. I think that's actually the only thing that's missing at Pesach Seder, right? If you think about it, it's such a well-rounded meal. The only thing we're missing is a good piece of steak. So you have a good piece of meat. So, and you make a special bracha. Oh, sorry. Before that, not the Paschal lamb. This is making a bracha on the sacrifice that you brought, the karban chagiga. This is the sacrifice in honor of the holiday. The first piece of meat that you should eat is a piece from the karban chagiga, the sacrifice in honor of the Yom Tov, in honor of the holiday. And then you make another bracha. You make a bracha that on the eating of the sacrifice the Paschal lamb. Pesach, and you have to eat from the Paschal lamb. That you can't have one in mind with the other. Each one is an individual mitzvah. Each sacrifice is an individual sacrifice, and one bracha cannot be for both. Each one has to be individual. Halacha ches number 8. Zman hazeh, but in our times, she'ein sham karban, that we don't have the sacrifices. After he makes the bracha on the matzah, so then he makes a special bracha al achilas matzah, as we do. And he puts the matzah in the chareises, which we don't do. And he eats, and then he goes and he makes a bracha al achilas matzah, separate bracha on the matzah, like we do. And the matzah we dip into the chareises, and you should eat it. But don't put it too long. Don't leave it in the chareises, and don't have too much chareises on it, because the whole point of the matzah is that it's bitter, and you might take away the bitterness of it. It's a rabbinic mitzvah, and then afterwards we have kaidech, which is the sandwich, and then you dip that into the chareises. You eat it without a bracha. We make a special statement, this is all a remembrance, in order to remember what they've done in the times of the temple. Halacha test number 9. And then you continue, and you have the suda. You have to have a meal. It's a mitzvah to have a meal. It's Yom Tov, so you have to have a meal. So Shulchan Aruch. You're allowed to eat anything you want to eat. You're allowed to drink anything you want to drink. And then, but at the end, the dessert, the end of it has to be Pesach. You have to eat part of this of the Pesach sacrifice, this Paschal lamb. Afilu kazayis, you have to eat, even if it's only the size of an olive. But that's what you have to eat. That's the last thing that you should be eating at the end of the Seder. And you don't eat anything afterwards. Today that we don't have the Paschal lamb, so we eat so we should eat the kazayis matzah, which is the afikaiman that we eat after the meal, and we should eat at least the size of an olive, which is anywhere between a quarter to a third of a matzah for the most part. So it makes a separation, and the taste of the of the Paschal lamb, or in our case, the taste of the matzah should be in his mouth, because that is the mitzvah of the night. So we should keep that taste in our mouth. Halacha Yud, number 10. And then you wash your hands and you do grace after meals, and you do that on the third cup of wine by the seder, and you drink it. After you finish benching, after you finish grace after meals, you pour your fourth cup. The Geimer love is halal, and you finish the halal. We started the halal at the end of Magid. We finish it after benching. Hashem and there's other praises of Hashem that we do, and then you make a bracha ber pri agafen, and afterwards, after the fourth cup, that you don't taste anything, you don't drink anything a whole night. After the fourth cup, we don't eat or drink anything. If you need water, the Rambam says you should have water, but otherwise you should keep away from eating or drinking after the fourth cup of wine. And there is a custom of pouring a fifth cup, not in our Haggadah, and to say the Halal Hagadol, which is other parts of Tehillim, of Psalms, other Psalms, because this is not a must, this is not this is not
obligation.
It's not an obligation like the other four. And also you can finish off the halal at any place. You don't have to sit at the table. So you don't have to sit at the table. You could sit somewhere else, even if it's not where you ate the regular meal. They're asking about the fifth cup for Mashiach. No, we have a custom. The Rambam does not talk about it, but in our Haggadah, we pour a fifth cup for Eliyahu Navi that comes to visit us, that we don't drink. Halacha Yud Aleph, number 11. Obviously we don't drink because we leave it for Eliyahu Navi to drink. Halacha 11. Somewhere a place. So now there's some people that have a custom about specifically not eating any roasted meat on Pesach night, because what's roasted meat? Roasted meat represents the Paschal lamb. So, but there's different customs. So the Rambam says if you live in a place that they do have a custom of eating roasted meat on Pesach, so then fine, you could eat it. But if you're in a city where they have a custom not to eat roasted meat, you shouldn't eat because someone might say, hold on a second, what are you're eating the Paschal lamb and you're not in Yerushalayim, and you're not allowed to eat the Paschal lamb outside of Yerushalayim. But no matter where you are, you're definitely not allowed to have, even if the custom is that they eat roasted meat in your town, but you're not allowed to have a whole lamb on the table, a roasted lamb on the table, because that's really like, making as if you have a Korban Pesach there, a Paschal lamb, and that's a problem. If you're making it look like you're eating holy things that you're not allowed to eat outside of Yerushalayim, and you're outside of Yerushalayim. But if it was cut up, not a whole lamb, it's missing a limb, or one of the limbs were boiled, I think it means, and it's still connected, so that is okay in a place where that was the custom. So that's the halacha Yud Beis, number 12. What if someone doesn't have wine? It's hard for us to imagine, but in the shtetl, people they didn't have wine. It was a limit, or a poor person, etc. Doesn't have wine on the night of Pesach. So their halacha is on Shabbos you can make kiddush on bread, right, on challah. So you could do the same thing on Pesach. You make kiddush on the matzah. Basically, and you continue doing the order that the Rambam put out over here. What if someone doesn't have a vegetable, he only has bitter herbs. That's the only vegetable that he has. So when we do karpas in the beginning, when he makes the bracha on karpas, so then you make a blessing on this marar, on the bitter herbs, and you eat it part as karpas. And then when you finish magid, when you finish the agada, you finish magid, you make the bracha on the matzah and you eat the and then you continue and you eat from the marar without a bracha. We have it similar today, that we don't make another hadama, right? Because we have that in mind. So it's not the same exact, but it's something similar to that. Halacha 13. Is now matzah. Matzah has has to be shmura matzah, especially the matzah that you eat by Pesach night, by the Seder night. Even the rest of Pesach, it should be shmura matzah, but for sure for the Seder, it's got to be shmura matzah. So if someone doesn't have enough shmura matzah, he only has a kazayis.
Which is guarded matzah.
Yeah, guarded matzah means that it was watched from the time that it was from the field, from the wheat growing in the field, from when it was
once it's
harvested.
cut from the field, and no water should come in contact.
From the harvest, from when it was harvested, it was make sure that no water comes into contact with it. So that's in yesterday's Rambam, I think. Yesterday's Rambam about the idea of not having any water together with harvested wheat for Pesach. Now. And that's what shmura means it was watched. So if you have a lot of matzah, but you only have a kazayis, the size of an olive, that's the amount that you have to eat Pesach night in order to accomplish the mitzvah. So, but you only have one kazayis of shmura matzah, of watched over matzah, so do whatever you need to do, and you have your meal and you have matzah part of your meal, etc. So then afterwards, you should make a bracha of al achilas matzah, the special bracha on the mitzvah of eating matzah. And you should eat that kazayis. So it seems that the Rambam is saying that you should eat this as not in the maitzi matzah, but in the by the end after what's it called tzafon after the meal by the afikomen, exactly. Halacha Yudalid number 14. If someone was sleeping, he fell asleep. He's just sitting by the soda, by the meal, by Shulchan Aruch, and he woke up. You have to go back and eat it again. It's okay. You already. There was a group. There was the whole family was over together, or a few families over together, sitting around the table. And the Yashnu Miksasan, some of them fell asleep. They say Chasuda in the middle of the meal, Chayzim Vaichlim, you could go back and eat because some of them were up, so they had in mind to keep the meal going for everybody. But if they all fell asleep, they shouldn't eat. But if they just didn't fall asleep, they dozed off a little bit. Even if it was all of them, they could continue to eat. And with this, we finish the halachas of Chometz and Matzah.
Thank you, Label. So we're going to continue now with the text of the Haggadah, and then we'll go into chapters 1 and 2 of Rosh Hashana. Thank you. So this is the Rambam's Haggadah. It's a little different. It's a little different than the one that is used for sure in Chabad, but by most people. Remember that the Rambam lived over 850 years ago, and just like in prayers, there's been additions to the prayer service. Likewise, in the Haggadah, over time there were things that were also a little different or added to it. I'm not certain with the Haggadah exactly, but okay, I'm going to do this in the English. Everybody in the English? Okay. So one begins pouring, the second couple recites. In haste, we left Egypt. Okay. This is the bread of affliction. Halach ma'anya. The achlu of Arsana, Ba'ara de Mitzrayim, Kol Dichven Yesef V'Yeichel. This is the bread of affliction are eaten by our ancestors in the land of Egypt. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Whoever is needy, let him come and join in the observance of Passover. This year we are here. Next year we will be in Eretz Yisrael. Now we are slaves. Next year we will be free men. Then we go into the Manishtana. Why is this night different than all other nights? We went through it earlier, so I just went through the Hebrew now. Then we begin that we were slaves, Abadim, to Pharaoh, Bim Mitzrayim in Egypt. But God, our Lord, brought us out from here with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm. If the Holy One, blessed be He, had not taken our ancestors out of Egypt, then we, our children, and our grandchildren, would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. Therefore, even if we were all wise, all men of understanding, all elders, all well versed in Torah, we would still be commanded to tell about the Exodus from Egypt. For whoever tells about it at length, behold, he is worthy of praise. Now, an example of this. Once Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon dined together at the Seder in Bnei Brak. They discussed the Exodus from Egypt throughout the entire night until the students came and told them, teachers, the time for reciting the Shema in the morning has arrived. Look how long they spent till the morning. That's bringing proof. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to them, now when are you supposed to tell the story? When does it begin? So he said to them, I am like 70-year-old man. Nevertheless, I did not merit to understand the reason for the obligation to recall the exodus from Egypt. But then until Ben Zoma interpreted the verse in order. We just had it in this week's Parsha, right? In order to remember the day that you left Egypt, all the days of your life. The phrase, the days of your life, refer to the days. Adding the word all the days includes also the nights. The sages interpreted the verse, the days of your life refers to the present world. All the days of life indicate the Messianic era, times of Mashiach. Blessed be the omnipresent. Then we continue. So this is when we're supposed to tell the Haggadah. Who do we tell the Haggadah to? So the Torah speaks of 4 sons, one wise, one wicked, one simple, and one who doesn't know how to ask. The wise son, what does he say? What are the testimonies, statutes, and the laws that God, our Lord, has commanded you? You should thus reply to him, teaching the laws of the Pesach until the final concept. One may not eat from any dessert after the Paschal sacrifice. Like we learned earlier, right? You shouldn't eat anything after the Afikomen. The matzah that we eat at the end of the meal, back in the day in the Holy Temple, it was the Paschal Lamb offering. So we teach him from the beginning to the end. The wicked son, what does he say? What is his service to you? By saying to you, he implies not to himself, since he's excluded himself from the people, the Jewish people at large. He denies the foundation of our faith. Therefore, you should blunt his teeth and tell him, it is because of this, what God did for me when I went out of Egypt. By saying for me, you imply, but not for him. Had he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. Ooh, the Rabbi explains this, which we won't go into now. How could we say such a negative thing to a fellow Jew? And the Rabbi kind of flips it around, but another time. Now we're learning Rambam. The simple son, what does he say? The simple son. You should tell him with a strong hand, God brought us out of Egypt from the house of bondage. The son who does not know how to ask. The son who does not know what to ask, you must open him up. As the verse states, you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of this that God did for me when I went out of Egypt. You shall tell your son on that day. Does the obligation relate to the narrative of Pesach begin on the first of the month? The Torah teaches that you shall tell your son on that day, on the day of Exodus. From the phrase on the day, one might infer it. Now we know that everybody has to be there. 4 sons, everybody has to be part of the Pesach Seder. That's who we're talking to. Now, when are we talking to them? So he's saying on that day, one might infer while it is still day. In other words, you can start your Seder by daytime, especially when it started, nightfall is very late. It's difficult to start so late. No, but it has to be on that day. Hence the Torah adds, it is because of this, that's the obligation begins only when Matzah and Morah are placed before them. In other words, it can only be after nightfall. A big mistake many people make of making the Seder earlier. So now that we got all the, everybody set, who's supposed to be there? When are we supposed to say this? The who, what, when, and where? Now we begin the story. In the beginning, our ancestors were worshippers of other gods, but now the omnipresent has drawn us close to his service, as it is stated. So God, the Lord of Israel, says, your ancestors had always lived beyond the Euphrates River, Terach, the father of Abraham and Nahor, and they served other gods. So we start off with negativity of being idolaters. And then I took your patriarch Abraham from beyond the river and led him through the land of Canaan. I multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac, Yitzchak. Yitzchak I gave Yaakov and Esau. And to Esau I gave Mount Seir to inherit. But to Yaakov and his children, they went down to Egypt. They went down to Egypt. This is where the enslavement began. Blessed be he who keeps his promise to Israel. Blessed be he, the Holy One. Blessed be he. He calculated the end of our bondage in order to fulfill his pledge to Abraham, made in the covenant Beinam Sarim, as it is stated. And he said to Avram, know we with certainty that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not their own. The natives will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. As originally it's for 400 years. We were only there for 210. We got out on good behavior early. But ultimately we will execute judgment upon the nation they shall serve, and afterwards they shall leave with great wealth. It is this that stood by our ancestors. Now we now make an emphasis about God being always there for our salvation. Not only was from Egypt, right? It's not only one that has risen up against us to destroy us. Rather, in every generation, they rise against to annihilate us. There's always anti-Semitism. People want to destroy the Jewish people. However, the Holy One, blessed be he, saves us from their hand. Now we continue with the story. Go and learn. We take up the story now apart in more details. What Lavan attempted to do to our patriarch Yaakov. Pharaoh decreed only against the males, but Lavan attempted to uproot everything, as it is stated. The Aramean sought to destroy my father. He descended to Egypt and sojourned there. This teaches us the patriarch Yaakov did not go down to Egypt with the intention of settling there, but merely to sojourn there, as it is stated. And they told Pharaoh that we've come to sojourn in this land, for there's no pasture for the flocks of your servants, since there is a famine in the land of Canaan. Now, please let us, your servants dwell in the land of Goshen, with a small number of people, as it is stated. Your ancestors went down to Egypt with so many people. Now God has made you numerous as the stars of heaven. Thus he became a nation and teaches Israel were distinct there. Great and powerful, as it is stated, the children of Israel were fruitful, became prolific, multiplied, and became very, very powerful, and the land became full of them and populous, as it is stated, and I made you as numerous as the plants of the field. You grew and developed and became very attractive, your breasts firm, and your hair grew long, but you were naked and bare from mitzvahs. It's a metaphor of naked and bare from mitzvahs. And the Egyptians were cruel to us. It is stated, come, let us deal cleverly with them, lest they multiply. Then, if there were a war, they might join our enemies and drive us out of the land. So let's defeat them in a manner of trickery. They made us suffer, as it is stated. They placed taskmasters over them to oppress them with hard labor, and they built Pisaim and Ramses as supply centers for Pharaoh. They imposed harsh slavery upon us, as it is stated. The Egyptians made the children of Israel do backbreaking labor. We cried out to God, the Lord of our fathers, that is stated. After those many days, the king of Egypt died. The children of Israel groaned because of the work. When they cried out over their slavery, their pleas rose up before God. God heard our voice, and as it stated, God heard our cries, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. He saw our suffering. This refers to the disruption of family life. And God saw the children of Israel, and he took note. Our difficult labor, this refers to the children, as it is stated. Every boy who is born must be cast into the river, but every girl shall be allowed to live and assimilate to become like an Egyptian. And our distress, this refers to the pressure applied by the Egyptians, as is stated. I've also seen the oppression which the Egyptians are applying to them. God brought us out of Egypt, not by a medium of any angel, not by a medium of a seraph, nor by medium of any agent. Rather, it was God himself, the Holy One, blessed be he himself in his glory, as it is stated. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will slay every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from man to beast. I will execute judgments against all gods of Egypt. I, God, the essence, God himself. With a mighty hand, this refers to the epidemic, as it is stated, behold, the hand of God will be directed against your cattle in the field, against the horses and the asses and the camels and the oxen and the sheep, with a very severe epidemic. An outstretched arm. God has got the ultimate arm. He's reaching towards us. It's not a physical arm, but it's the real arm. There's first a sword with a unsheathed sword is in his hand, stretched over Jerusalem. with great visions. This refers to revelation of the divine presence. As stated, has God ever performed miracles coming to take one nation out of the midst of another nation with miracle signs, wonders, war, a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with a terrifying phenomena as God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? Signs. This refers to the staff, as it is stated, take the staff in your hand, for which you shall perform the signs. And wonders. This refers to the blood, as it is stated, I reveal wonders in the heaven and earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. Other than our interpretation is the above. Each phrase is associated with two plagues, the mighty hand too, with outstretched arm too, with great visions too, with the signs too, with wonders too. This and are the 10 plagues the Olam blessed be He brought upon the Egyptians in Egypt. They are blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, epidemic, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, slaying of the firstborn. Rabbi Yehuda coined the abbreviated for them, the tzach, adash, ba'achav. Rabbi Gamaliel would say, whoever does not discuss the following three things on Pesach does not fulfill the obligation. They are paschal sacrifice, matzah, maror. Right, the paschal sacrifice that our ancestors ate during the time of the temple was standing. For what reason? Because the Holy One, blessed be He, passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt, as it is stated, you shall say it is a Pesach sacrifice for God, because He passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, striking the Egyptians and saving our homes. The people bowed down and prostrated themselves. Matzah we eat for what reason? Because the dough that our ancestors did not have time to become leavened before the King of Kings, only one blessed be He, revealed Himself to take them and redeem them. As it is stated, they baked matzah cakes from the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, because it had not risen, for they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any other provisions for themselves. The moral of the weed, what is the reason? Because Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt. As is stated, they made the Jews' lives bitter with hard service, with mortar and with bricks, with all matters of service in the field, their entire service, at which they made them slave vigorously. In every generation, a person is obligated to regard himself as he has left Egypt. It was not only our ancestors from whom the Holy One blessed be He redeemed from Egypt, rather He redeems us, as it is stated. He brought us out from there so that He might bring us to the land He promised our fathers and give it to us. Therefore, we are obligated to pray, to thank, praise, laud, glorify, exalt, magnify, adore, and give eternal honor to the One who did all of these miracles for us, for our ancestors. He took us out of slavery, from freedom, from servitude to redemption, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, and from deep darkness to great light. Therefore, let us recite, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, servants of God. Offer praise in the name of God. May God's name be praised. This is a psalm until the flintstone of the stream of waters. That's from Tehillim 114. Then we end off the Haggadah, the story. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who redeemed us and redeemed our ancestors from Egypt, and has enabled us to reach this night, so that we may eat matzah and maror upon it. So to God, our Lord, the Lord of our fathers, enable us to reach other festivals and holidays that will come to us in peace, celebrating in the rebuilding of your city, and rejoicing in your service. Then we shall eat the sacrifices of the paschal offerings, whose blood shall reach the wall of the altar of the graciously accepted. Then we shall offer thanks to you with a new song for our redemption and for the deliverance of our souls. Blessed are you, God, Baruch atah Hashem, who redeemed Israel, who redeems the Jewish people, according to the order of which one recites the blessing of God on the first night, one recites the blessing of God on the second night, which is instituted because of exile. Similarly, the second night we're obligated to 4 cups of wine, and the other practices of the first night, the help of heaven. This concludes the text of the Haggadah and concludes the halachas of Pesach and all the laws pertaining to Chometz and Matzah. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. Okay, now that we celebrated Pesach, let's go celebrate Rosh Hashana and Sukkot, ultimately Lulav and Esrei. Okay. Introduction to the laws of Shofar, Sukkah, and Lulav. We will do chapter 1 and 2 today. So we did finish off Pesach. Now we go to the next holiday. This text, there are 3 positive commandments, and they are: the first one, to listen to the sounding of the shofar on the first of Tishrei. The second is Leishev B'Sukkah, Kol Shimas Yimei Achag. Second is to dwell in a sukkah throughout the 7 days of the holiday Pesach. And the third is Lito Lulav B'Mikdash, Kol Shimas Yimei Achag, and the third is to take a lulav in the temple throughout the 7 days of the festival of Sukkot. That's biblical mitzvahs, right? Of course, there are rabbinic mitzvahs, but here he's just pointing out the 613 biblical commandments, and 3 of them are involved in the laws of Rosh Hashana and Sukkot. Okay, halacha number 1. We will do this in English. Excuse me, just one moment. I need to say a l'chaim over here. How wet it is. Okay, it is a positive commandment from the Torah to hear the sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashana. That's the mitzvah of the day, right? As states, it shall be a day of sounding the horns ram for you. Yom Trua Lachem is the verse that we have in Parshas Pinchas, in the book of Numbers. The shofar, which is sounded both on Rosh Hashanah and the Yovel is the 50 years, is a bent ram's horn. All shofars other than that of a ram are unacceptable. Even though the sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is not explicitly mentioned in the Torah, it was derived by our sages in the following manner. Concerning the Yovel, in Leviticus it says, Havartim shofar, that you shall make a proclamation sounding the shofar. There it says the word shofar. You shall proclaim with the shofar. The oral tradition explains that just as the sounding required by the Torah in the Yovel requires a shofar, a ram's horn, so too the sounding of Rosh Hashanah requires a shofar. Because again, if you look at the words in the Hebrew, it says Yom Trua Yilachem. It says it will be a day of sounding for you. Trua means a sounding. It doesn't say a ram's horn, but by Jubilee it does say. So from the Jubilee, it has the same kind of wording, Trua, right? But it says Trua Taviru Shofar. So from there, we get the idea that there's a connection between them. And from there, we know it's a ram's horn where the sound is made. As you can't go like that, you need a ram's horn. Halacha number 2. In the temple on a Rosh Hashanah, they would blow the shofar in the following manner. There was 1 shofar and 2 trumpets on either side. The sounding of the shofar was extended, while that of the trumpets was shortened, because the mitzvah of the day is performed by the shofar, not by the trumpets. Why were the trumpets sounded together with it then? Because it says in Psalms, you shall sound trumpets and the voice of the shofar before God the King. However, in other places in Rosh Hashanah, only the shofar was blown. So we only know the custom of shofar because that's only again by the temple. Halacha number 3. At the outset, we should not blow a shofar of idol worship. However, if one sounded it, one has fulfilled his obligation. In contrast, should one sound the shofar belonging to an apostate city, one has not fulfilled one's obligation, because there you're not allowed to have pleasure from it. And here it's only from the sound that you are having, right? You're not allowed to pleasure from anything of it, from the idolatry. You're not having pleasure from the thing, you're having the pleasure from the sound. Concerning a stolen shofar, one who blows it fulfilled his obligation, because the mitzvah is only to listen to the sound, even though the listener does not touch the shofar or lift it up, even if you didn't, right? In other words, if it was just lying there and I blew into the shofar, it just happened to be lying there and I blow into it, so I didn't, do anything. And therefore, there's a way of listening to it, even though you did not. In other words, you're hearing something without taking it. So therefore, the laws of that do not apply to the sound alone. To the object, yes, but not to the sound. Similarly, a shofar from an olah offering should not be sounded But if one sounded it, he fulfills his obligation because the laws of Me'ilah do not apply with regard to sound alone. Right, because an oila means you brought an offering on the you brought an offering. So this ram that you brought as an offering. So how could you, if it's consecrated, how can you have pleasure from it? You're not allowed to have pleasure from something that has been consecrated, but you're having pleasure from what? The sound. From that is not from the object itself, and therefore that's permissible, even though it was a consecrated animal. If you ask, behold, I have derived benefit from hearing the sound. Shofar mitzvahs were not given for benefit. And there's no benefit in the mitzvah. In other words, they're given for obligation to fulfill, but not for pleasure. Based on this concept, a person who vows not to derive benefit from the shofar may use it to blow tekias required to fulfill the mitzvah, right? Because you're not having benefit. You're fulfilling your obligation. Number 4, regarding a shofar to be used on Rosh Hashana, it is forbidden to violate the festival laws to obtain it. This applies even when the forbidden practice is in the category of shvus, meaning rabbinic. How is the above exemplified? If there's a shofar in a treetop or across the river, and that the only shofar available, one may not climb the tree or swim across the water to bring it, right? Which is only a rabbinic law that you are transgressing. Nonetheless, you can't. Needless to say, one may not cut the shofar from the animal's head to perform a forbidden labor, to perform the to prepare the shofar so that we may blow from it. That's a biblical law. That for sure you're not allowed to do. The rationale for the above is blowing the shofar fulfills a positive commandment, while the observance of the festival fulfills both a positive and negative commandment. So the observance of a positive commandment does not negate the observance of both a positive and negative commandment. It is permitted to rinse a shofar with water, wine, or vinegar in order to improve its tone. However, as an expression of deference, one should never use urine for that purpose, even though that was something really good to clean it, lest one view the mitzvah in a deprecating manner, right? So it's not, not an appropriate thing, even though it would be good for it. Halacha number 5, the minimum size of a shofar is a measure sufficient that one may hold the shofar in his hand with ends visibly protruding on either side. It has to protrude from this side and from this side. So it has to be that size. So it's just a little more than a tefach. Should the shofar be cracked lengthwise, it is unacceptable, right? On the lengthwise. Should it be cracked widthwise, if the measure equivalent to the minimum size of the shofar remains, it is kosher. So if it's cracked over here and there's still enough for above below, then it is okay. Then it's considered as if it's cut off from that place where it's cracked. Regarding a shofar with a hole, if it is plugged with another substance, it's unacceptable. If it is plugged with its own kind, material from the shofar, it is kosher under the following conditions. The majority of the shofar remains whole. The plugging of the holes did not alter its sound. If one merely perforated the insides of the horn but did not remove it, right? You drilled a hole, but you didn't remove the gut on the inside, it is kosher because the substance of the same kind is not considered as an intervening entity. Should one stick together fragments of the shofars until one has constructed a shofar, it is unacceptable. Number 6, if one made an addition to a shofar, whether it's of its kind or of any other substance, it's unacceptable. You add a piece to it, unacceptable, right? Like a silver, you want a nice silver mouthpiece to it. You add it to it, unacceptable. Should one coat it with gold from the inside or at the mouthpiece? It is unacceptable. Should one coat it on the outside? It is, if its sound is changed from what it was originally, it is unacceptable. It is not acceptable. Well, same one, unacceptable. If its sound did not change, it is kosher. Right? Should one place one shofar within another? If one hears the sound of the inner shofar, one has fulfilled one's obligation. If one hears the outer shofar, one has not fulfilled his obligation. Right? Should one widen the narrow portion of the shofar and narrow its wider end, the shofar is unacceptable. Halacha number 7. If a shofar was long and one shortened it, it is kosher. If it was scrapped, if one scraped away the horn, either from the inside or the outside, even if one did so to extend that all that remained was a thin external shell, it is kosher. Regardless of whether the shofar sound is heavy, thin, or raspy, it is kosher because all sounds produced by a shofar are kosher. Halacha number 8. When a person sounds a shofar within a pit or within a cave, those standing within the pit or the cave fulfill their obligation. Concerning those standing outside, if they hear the sound of the shofar, they fulfill their obligation. If they hear the sound of an echo, they do not fulfill their obligation. You hear directly from the shofar. From here, we learn that you cannot fulfill by hearing it on the telephone because you're not hearing it directly, or by Zoom. If you're going to be on Rosh Hashana in a synagogue and you're going to hear the shofar by Zoom, you do not fulfill your obligation. I've spoken to many people about this, that they're not going to go to services and they want to hear, a service on Zoom. Aside from the fact that it is a holiday and you're not allowed to do that, but you don't fulfill the obligation of hearing the shofar because you're not hearing it directly. Similar principles apply regarding one who blows into a giant barrel. If he hears the sound of the shofar, he fulfills his obligation. If he hears an echo, he does not fulfill his obligation. Chapter number 2. Everyone is obligated to hear the sounding of the shofar. Priests, Levites, Israelites, converts, and freed slaves. However, women, slaves, and minors are free of the obligation. A person who is a half slave and a half free, a timtum is someone whose genitals you cannot tell, they're covered over and you can't tell if they're male or female, or an androgynous in Hebrew, androgynous in English, or I think it's Latin originally, are obligated to hear shofar. Why? Because don't know they're male or they're female. So we have to take, therefore, and also the slave who's half free. How can you be half free? Well, because if you're owned by two people and one person frees you and the other person doesn't, so then you're only half free, because that half free, you're then obligated as a result. Halacha number 2, whoever is not obligated, by the way, even though women are not obligated, nonetheless, why they're not obligated? Because it's a mitzvah that is got a certain time limit, a parameter to it. And women are not time-bound. Mitzvahs are not an obligation for women. But yet, the custom is to make sure that women do hear the mitzvah of shofar. Whoever is not himself obligated regarding this matter cannot facilitate the performance of the mitzvah for one who's obligated. Thus, if a woman or a minor blows a shofar, one who hears does not fulfill his obligation, right? Because only one who's obligated can blow for another person who's obligated. An androgynous can facilitate the performance of the mitzvah for one of his kind, but not for one who is not of his kind. A tumtum can facilitate the performance of the mitzvah for anyone, whether of his kind or not his kind. For it is a layer of skin covering the tumtum's genitals is cut open. It is possible that we discover that the tumtum is male, but if it's possible that it will be discovered that the tumtum is, but it is possible that it will be discovered that the tumtum is female. 1 second. We'll have to get back to that. Okay. To look up that further. Halacha number 3: a person who is a half slave and a half free cannot even facilitate the performance of mitzvah for himself. Why? Because the aspect of himself, which is a slave, cannot facilitate the performance of the mitzvah for the aspect of himself, which is free. How should he fulfill this obligation? He should hear from a free man blow the shofar. Halacha number 4: a person who occupies himself with blowing the shofar in order to learn does not fulfill his obligation, because you have to have in mind that you're doing a mitzvah, not that you are just practicing. Similarly, one who hears the shofar from a person who blows it casually does not fulfill his obligation, right? In other words, because he's not doing it as a mitzvah. If a person hearing had intention of fulfilling his obligation, but the person blowing did not have the intention of facilitating the latter's performance of the mitzvah, or the person blowing had the intention of facilitating his colleague's performance of the mitzvah, but the person hearing did not have intention of fulfilling his obligation, the person hearing did not fulfill his obligation. Rather, both the person hearing and the one allowing him to hear must have proper intention. So if I'm blowing and I have intention, right? I have to have intention for others to fulfill the mitzvah, and you must have intention if you're hearing that you're fulfilling through my blowing the shofar. If a person blew the shofar with the intention of enabling all those hearing his blowing to perform the mitzvah, so you're blowing it outside, and you're blowing it. We did shofar in the park here in Montreal and in many cities throughout the world. Chabad did. We did shofar everywhere, blowing. And we have in mind that whoever hears this, that's Jewish, that needs to hear it, we have them in mind. That's how powerful the mind is. And that's how powerfully we are connected with each other as fellow Jews. And the listener heard while having the intention to fulfill the obligation, even though the person blowing did not have specific intention that this individual would hear his blowing, nor did he know about him. The listener has fulfilled his obligation because the blower had in mind all those who heard him. That's how connected we are. Accordingly, if a person was traveling on a journey or was sitting in his house and heard the tekiyas from a person leading the congregation, he has fulfilled the obligation if he had the intention, since the leader of the congregation had the intention of enabling the many to fulfill their obligation, or as we blow in the shofar in the park, similar idea. Number 6 is the festival of Rosh Hashana falls on Shabbos. The shofar is not sounded in every place. The law was enacted even though blowing the shofar was forbidden only by Ashvus, as a rabbinic law that blowing the shofar is forbidden on Shabbos. It would be appropriate that the shofar be sounded, for the positive commandment of the Torah should supersede Ashvus instituted by sages. If so, why is the shofar not sounded? So we have a biblical law of blowing the shofar. We have a rabbinic law that says not on Shabbos, but should a biblical law supersede a rabbinic law? So why doesn't so with shofars? The Rambam explains, because of the decree of the sages, lest a person take it in the hands and carry it to a colleague so that the latter can blow for him, and in the process carry it 4 cubits in the public domain or transfer it from one domain to another, and thus violate a prohibition punishable by being stoned to death if he was forewarned in what he's doing, right? This is necessary because all are obligated in the mitzvah of blowing shofar, but not all are skilled in it. So if I'm not skilled in blowing the shofar, I'm going to take it maybe in the Reshus Rabbim, in the public domain on Shabbos, and therefore I may transgress the laws of Shabbos. So there's Rabbi said, you know what? People are not skilled, and therefore they're going to be, wanting to fulfill this mitzvah appropriately. They're going to take their shofar in the public domain to somebody who can help them and transgress. So therefore, you know what? I'm not going to blow the shofar on Shabbos. That is the reasoning. Halacha number 7, children who have not reached an age at which they can be educated, we need not prevent them from blowing the shofar on Shabbos, which is not a festival of Rosh Hashana, so that they will learn to blow, right? Because they're not obliged. An adult is permitted to be involved in the instruction of children in the blowing of shofar on festival. This applies concerning both children who have reached the age at which they can be educated, and those who have not reached that age. For blowing the shofar is prohibited only as a shvus, is only a rabbinic law that it's prohibited on Shabbos. So therefore, an adult can be involved in instructing a child and blowing the shofar on festivals. Halacha number 8. When the sages decreed not to sound the shofar on the Shabbos, they applied that decree only to places that lacked a court. However, a Jewish court, while the temple was standing and the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, was seated in Jerusalem, everyone would sound the shofar in Jerusalem throughout the entire period the court held its sessions there. This did not apply to the people of Jerusalem alone. Rather, every city that was within the outer limits of Jerusalem and those inhabited could see Jerusalem, extending those within the wadi, Hear the shofar blown in Jerusalem, excluding those on the mountaintops, and travel to Jerusalem, including those separated by a wadi from the city. The people in these cities would blow the shofar on the Shabbos as in Jerusalem, right? They were outside of Jerusalem, but they were connected to the city. They would be able to blow the shofar just as you would be able to blow in Jerusalem because you have there the high court. However, in other cities of Israel, they would not sound the shofar on Shabbos. At present, number 9, the temple is destroyed. So wherever a court whose judges receive smicha, rabbinic ordination, in the whole Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, permanently holds sessions, the shofar is sounded on Shabbos. Furthermore, the shofar is sounded on Shabbos only in a court that has sanctified the new moon. However, a shofar will not be sounded in other courts, even though the judges have received smicha. Also, the shofar is sounded only in the presence of high court. So you need the high court, you need that they sanctifying the new moon, right? Meaning that you don't have a calendar like we have today, right? That it's done by the high court, that they are doing that, and there's a presence of the high court, the Sanhedrin. Then you would be able to blow the shofar on Shabbos. It may be sounded during the entire time they are in session, even after they have begun preparing to rise. As long as they've not risen, the shofar may be sounded before them. However, outside the court, the shofar may not be sounded. So why is the shofar allowed to be sounded in the court, where other places not? Because the court is scrupulous in the observance of mitzvahs. And in its presence, those who blew the shofar will not carry the shofar in the public domain, for the court will warn the people and inform them. You don't have to worry there. We're talking about great sages and blowing the shofar there. No one's going to now take the shofar into the public domain and make a mistake and carry it. Therefore, it is possible to blow the shofar in the presence of the court in Jerusalem. Number 10, in the present age, we celebrate Rosh Hashana in exile for 2 days. The shofar is sounded on the second day, just as it sounded on the first. If the first day falls out on Shabbos, those who were not in the presence of the court fit to blow the shofar on the Shabbos may blow the shofar on the second day. With that, we conclude today's teachings. Any questions, any comments? No questions? Everything's clear?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is a question in the chat asking
okay.
why women can't blow the shofar. I'd like to know that as well.
No, a woman can blow shofar for a woman, but she can't blow shofar for a man, because a woman is not obliged to do the mitzvah. Because as we mentioned, it's a time-oriented mitzvah, and women are not obliged to fulfill time-oriented or time-relegated mitzvahs. They're not obliged. Obliged means, therefore, if they're not obliged, they cannot fulfill a mitzvah for a person who is obliged. So they can't fulfill it for a man. So they can't blow for a man, but they could blow for another woman, because another woman is not obliged.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So we got clarification. Any other questions?
Rabbi Fine, I had a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
The first question was regarding the having, I think label had mentioned it was in number 9, with you could eat whatever you want for the meal, but
Say that again. A what?
Sorry, I have a cold. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Talk that loud. Wait, I was told that you're not allowed to have anything roasted on the table except just the shankbone. But a label had said that you could have anything you want for the meal, and that as long as you don't have the whole lamb. So
right.
Can we still have something that is roasted for the meal?
So first of all, we roast the zroya, And Chabad custom is actually we take off from the chicken neck. We use a chicken neck and we roast it, right? It's to remind us of the Korban Pesach. But we take off some of the chicken as a reminder that we don't have the Korban Pesach today, right? So that's our custom. And there it was speaking about. Remember Rambam when he was speaking in Pesach, he was speaking between going back and forth between times in the temple, the laws in the temple, and how it was observed, and how it's observed today that we don't have the temple. So when we were speaking then about roasted, that was speaking about the Paschal lamb that you would have at your table that was roasted in the times of the Holy Temple, which we don't have now. We just have something to commemorate that, and that is the gorgul, the neck of a chicken, which is again the specific Chabad custom. Others might use might use a piece of bone from of meat or something like that. But that's what we use. But we actually roast it. We do roast it.
Right.
Right. But we don't eat from it.
Right.
Don't eat from it. Because, and that's why our custom is even to take off the meat from it, just as a reminder that we're not allowed to eat from it today.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Fine. And I had also another question about the fifth cup. Is the fifth cup supposed to symbolize Moshiach?
The fifth cup is for, as we mentioned, is for Eliyahu Hanavi, that we open the door, right? We pour the fifth cup and then we go to the door. I always joke with and I shake the table and I say, look at that. Eliyahu was sipping from the cup. Look, the wine is moving. The wine is moving. He came in to sip from the cup.
I got to remember that this year.
Yeah. So that's he didn't bring that. That's, as I mentioned. Remember, Rambam is how many years ago? Over 850 years ago. So, Judaism, there's 10 commandments carved in stone and things that don't change. 613 biblical commandments. Tefillin, you can't come and say, we want to be holier today. We're going to put 5 portions of the Torah in the tefillin instead of 4 because we want to, we want to have this one added. It's carved in stone, 4, not 5. Can't add. You're not adding something to God's mitzvah, right? Yet at the same time, we add things. We add Elena to the prayers. Elena was never part of the prayers many, 1,000 years ago, and other things too. We add the fifth cup of Eliyahu. It's a custom that came up later on. I'm not exactly certain. Actually, I have to do some research on that. Interesting. And you see that Rambam doesn't make mention of it. He does make mention of the fifth cup. He says there are different cups of that, but he doesn't say it in reference to what was the wording again? Yeah, he says, you say halal on it, right? He doesn't say that it's for Elijah. So that's why also we don't adjudicate law from the Rambam directly, like, oh, this is what we're going to fulfill in our observance, because there's another 1,000 years, approximately of Jewish life that things evolve, even though there's things carved in stone, at the same time they evolve. And that's the paradox of Jewish teachings. Okay. Any other questions? All right, tomorrow. Is it okay that on Sundays we do 12:45 instead of 12:15, so that way we have the same time every day of the week? Is 12:45 just the same for everybody? Is 12:45 not good for anybody?
Nope, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that way there, it's clear 12:45 all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That being said, I'm just thinking, yeah, 12:45. Okay, perfect. All right, folks.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Don't
Have a
forget
good
tonight,
day.
6:30. 6:30,
6:30.
join us on Zoom here, or join us on Zoom here.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Good day.
Thank you, Rabbi
Shavua tov,
Chaim.
good
We'll see
tov.
you later.
Yeah. God bless you all. See you all. Bye-bye.